Okay, what we have to look at now is, since we sort of have a basic understanding of what a neuron is and how it works, the next question is, how does that neuron communicate with other neurons in the nervous system? So let's talk a little bit about that. So the nerve impulse is a signal that must be transmitted from a neuron to other cells or to other neurons. The transmission takes place at special spaces or junctions called synapses, where terminal buttons release chemicals called neurotransmitters. Here. So if we take a look at a typical synapse, the two neurons are separated by the synaptic cleft, which is the space between neurons. That's a microscopic gap between the terminal button of one neuron and the cell membrane of another neuron. Signals have to cross this gap for neurons to communicate, and those signals are the neurotransmitter molecules. In this situation, a neuron that sends a signal across the synapse is called the presynaptic neuron, and the neuron that receives the signal is called the postsynaptic neuron. Inside the terminal button of the presynaptic cell are synaptic vesicles, highlighted in yellow. They're small sacs containing the chemicals called neurotransmitters. The arrival of the action potential, that's that spark that we talked about in the last video, at an axon's terminal button trigger the release of neurotransmitters. They are released when a vesicle fuses with the membrane of the presynaptic neuron and releases its contents into the synaptic cleft. A specific neurotransmitter can bind only to a receptor site that its molecular structure will allow it to fit into, much like a key must fit into a lock. Thus, the neurotransmitter fits and can bind to the postsynaptic membrane at the receptor site at the left but not at other sites. When a neurotransmitter and a suitable receptor molecule combine, reactions in the cell membrane cause a voltage change at the receptor site. This voltage change is called a postsynaptic potential. After producing postsynaptic potentials, which last only a fraction of a second, neurotransmitter molecules diffuse back into the synaptic cleft. From there, most are sponged up by the presynaptic membrane and recycled. Others are activated by enzymes that metabolize or convert them into inactive forms. Still, others simply drift away from the synapse. In summary, synaptic transmission involves 5 key processes. So let's go through each one. Synthesis, where the neurotransmitter is basically manufactured in the presynaptic neuron. Release, where the neurotransmitters are released from the presynaptic cell. Binding, where they bind to the receptor site of the postsynaptic membrane. Inactivation, where they sort of just are inactivated or they drift away from the synapse. Or reuptake, where the presynaptic neuron recycles this neurotransmitter by sucking it back up, if you will, into its vesicle. So let's take a quick look at all this again, just to do a review. So the postsynaptic neuron would be here. The presynaptic neuron would be here. The synaptic cleft would be in here. The neuron that shows receptor sites would be here. So the binding of a neurotransmitter to a receptor site on a postsynaptic neuron